Welcome to Grab Your Gear. I am Joe, and today we're going to talk again as we do. We try to on a regular basis, at least weekly, with Jack Windsor, the Ohio Press Network. Jack, how are you today?
Hey, Joe, I'm super fantastic. Great to be with you, man.
Well, if you're super fantastic, that's awesome. Hey, we chatted a little bit in our pre-production yesterday, and when we were together last time, we meant to talk about a censorship situation you were involved with, well, that involved your company. With Facebook. And lo and behold, maybe the gods were looking down on us that it was delayed a week because yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg sends a letter to Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, someone that you have interviewed a few times and had on your radio program. But let me give you a little setup here, and then I'm just going to hand it off to you. But basically, the gist of the letter is, this is what I took from it. He admits that law enforcement was used for political reasons, and that Facebook, due to censoring of COVID restrictions, even took out humor and satire. So those are the things that leaped out at me. But I want to go over this real quick. He sends us a letter on Monday to Jim Jordan, and basically says that the Biden administration had repeatedly put pressure on his company, Meta, Facebook, to censor content about the pandemic. And the letter goes to him, but he also pointed out that he participated in censorship, saying that they should not have demoted the New York Post story that was about Hunter Biden, the Hunter Biden laptop story ahead of the 2020 election. Said his company officials made a decision to bury the story after the FBI, this is where I'm saying the law enforcement got political, the FBI warned them of potential Russian disinformation campaign against the Bidens. And then Zuckerberg basically said it's been made clear that there was no Russian disinformation. In retrospect, they should have never demoted the story. One last thing before I get you to respond to all this. This is the same Mark Zuckerberg who invested $400 million in 2020 to help in what he called election assistance, which I'm still to this day not even sure is legal for a private citizen to assist in elections. But threw all that at you. Tell us your reaction to that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about your own interaction with Facebook and how you feel. Maybe you're going to get a letter next. Who knows? What do you say about this?
I say it's nice to know that what we knew, we knew.
Yeah.
The challenge is we knew it when we knew it, and there was a gross amount of gaslighting going on. But when you're in the middle of something and you go, well, wait a minute, this group got deplatformed, this post has been shadow banned, this communication has been removed. You scream and holler about it and go, this isn't right. What do you mean it's against community standards? So we knew it was going on then, and I've referred many times to this article that Molly Ball wrote after the 2020 election. It's in Time Magazine. You should look it up. Next time, maybe I'll have a link for you. But she spells out how this was all by design. There was a massive group of people who met consistently, and their entire focus was to quash the messaging from people who went against what they wanted. And what they wanted was to get Donald Trump out of the White House and Joe Biden in. But one quick thing about the FBI, and I'm certain that this will get me in trouble, but I don't care. I've talked with enough attorneys to know the 52 people who signed that letter that essentially said, this has the markings of Russian disinformation. There's a big problem there. I'm not an attorney. I'm not an FBI agent, but the attorneys tell me that the FBI had that laptop for such a length of time that they either, one, knew what was on the laptop, or two, should have reasonably known what was on the laptop. So it was either intentional election interference or it was dereliction of duty. And the problem that I have, and that most Americans have, is who is going to be held accountable? Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this because there's still some significant stuff going on. And 4 years later, you would think that we fixed the system and we are now free and treated fairly. And as we get closer to November, when people are posting about information, elections, candidates, whatever, that we wouldn't have to deal with this again. But Joe, I'm here to tell you, we're dealing with it again.
Yeah, the the thing about the election interference too, the 52 people were in the national security business. They were CIA,
Right.
NSA. These are
Yep.
people that supposedly would know better, especially if it was Russian interference. There are a lot of people that kind of agree with you that we are about to see an SHIT show coming up on this
Yep.
election because a group of people, and these are not Democrats.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we're not talking about Democrats here. We're talking about people who are far left extremists, and I don't know how else to put it. And I don't even know if anybody out there could disagree with who these people are, because I don't think they care. They're out there, and it's like they don't care if you know they're there. I mean, they're protesting at Cornell University yesterday morning because they don't like Jewish students, and that's pretty much it. But back to the censorship thing and the people behind this, and the reason we get into this network was built for people to get up and go to work every day and don't have time to look at all this garbage. And I mean, they aren't thinking about Facebook, and if their husband or wife is at home posting things about their families, that's Facebook to them. What Facebook is also is a major information highway. That's why people who are getting up every day going to work, merit shop workers, construction and trades, they aren't thinking about this stuff. They're thinking they go to
Right.
vote and it works.
Yeah.
But part of voting is being informed, Jack. And you had something,
Yes.
information, and an article put on Facebook. Tell us your story of how all of a sudden your magical work, poof,
Yeah.
shazam.
That disappeared. I'll go back and say in 2020 this happened quite a bit. Now, fast
Yeah.
forward, I published a story last week, and it was a breaking story that President Biden has engaged in impeachable conduct. That's a direct quote from a report written by 3 U.S. House committees. And in the report, I detail what the House uncovered from a high level, then give a few examples. But Joe, this is a report that I just kind of, guesstimated 90% of what was written was either a direct quote or was the massaging of the wording, to convey to readers what was in this nearly 300-page report. This was not me making up a conspiracy or using words that are, I don't know, trigger words that are opinion words. I mean, literally taking directly from the report. It got a lot of traction, as you can imagine, but soon after I published it, I received at least five messages from people, and one of them posted on my page that she tried to reshare the story, and Facebook removed her post, and they removed it for this reason. It looks like you tried to get likes, follows, shares, or video views in a misleading way. And so, I put a message out into the Facebook abyss. It probably went to an AI pocket or, some sort of whatever complaint mailbox, and simply said, what is inaccurate? We published a report that was released by Congress, and here we are. So apparently, Facebook does not like, maybe it's the combination of the words Joe Biden and impeachment or impeachable offense or something. But again, Joe Biden's not running. Kamala Harris is, but is the algorithm at Facebook now hardwired, or is it loaded up with AI instruction that automatically removes this? And here's the problem, Joe. And maybe I said this a few minutes ago, but I need to say it again. This will eventually be made right, but how long down the road? Right?
Yeah.
This stuff happened in 2020, and then they come back and go, "Oh, we're sorry, we did it wrong. Shouldn't have done it. Doggone it." Just like with the Hunter Biden laptop story. And at some point, they have to acknowledge there's a timeliness to this stuff. People, I don't think there are a lot of undecided voters right now, frankly, between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, maybe 1%. Um, but the reality is, if there are people who are on the fence, like, well, has this Biden administration done whatever? These kinds of things impact that. And for them to censor that, we could get into the discussion about how they're a private company and maybe they have the right to do it. But when you have the attention of the billions of people that you do, and now you're trying to be in my business and make editorial decisions, that's a no-no.
Do you think if he was still running for president, Zuckerberg would have apologized and sent the letter?
No.
Okay.
Do you?
Okay, go ahead.
No, do you think so?
I don't know, because Mark Zuckerberg seems to have found this enlightenment in a way, because it's not the first thing he's kind of done. Like he put Donald Trump back on Facebook a few weeks ago, but I also I see. I'm different. There's got to be a reason for everything, right?
Hmm.
People do things a lot of times at his level for a reason, and it's usually not a moral consciousness type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It could, it's kind of, I'll liken it to this. If you remember in 2016, many of the mainstream news outlets came out and said, wow, we got it wrong. Never saw this Donald Trump thing coming, man.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is, they didn't see it because they ignore flyover country. They ignore people
Yes.
that they think
You
are less than
people
them. They
here,
ignore me. That's right. They
people
don't
that are
give
like,
a rip.
at a construction site right now, they don't care.
Don't care. But because they got it wrong, they wanted to give the appearance of, well, listen, we're going to listen to you now, and we're going to, and then you fast forward to 2020 from 2016, and they did the same crap again. And I look at stuff like this, and I say, in a sense, it's giving the appearance of fairness because Mark Zuckerberg wants to appear fair. And I'm certain that The Atlantic, that wrote the article, the writer there earlier, might have been over the weekend actually, that condemned what's going on in the Biden Harris White House and how they handled the COVID situations. I'm certain that that was done to give the appearance of fairness.
Sure.
Um, that's how I look at it, Joe.
Yeah. Hopefully nobody in this audience is reading The Atlantic. Something else I want to run by you real quick. And this struck me for a different reason than probably most people, again, because I'm unusual. I think, I know I just look at things differently, but on the same day, or at least really close, yeah, it was after. So Bobby Kennedy announces his support for Trump. He's going to basically endorse Trump. And the reason he does it is because of censorship, things we're talking about right now,
Yeah.
and the lack of what he thinks is transparency among the Democratic Party, the hoops they made him go through to try to get on ballots, but also he went extensively in a press conference and talked about that he felt like the media was protecting Kamala Harris, that she hadn't done an interview, talked about the fact that there were days he'd do 10 and just would go from one to the other. And so that was part of it. So on that day, which was something that was kind of it was kind of glossed over, but this was last Friday. Attorney General Merrick Garland, he responded to Donald Trump's promise that he would pardon individuals who were convicted on January 6th at the riot at the Capitol. So naturally, he goes and talks to the press, saying that, and he threw this out there. He goes, "If anyone is thinking of interfering with peaceful transfer of power, they should look at the more than 1,400 prosecutions from January 6th." I took that more as this election's going to be done, and if anybody protests, we're going to start throwing people in jail. That's how I took it. And I thought the day that Bobby Kennedy endorses Trump, and maybe I'm a conspiracy theorist, but I just thought that, is timing ever, just coincidental? And I don't think it is. I took it as a threat.
No, something. I mean, something at that level, as you just pointed out with Zuckerberg, maybe even more at this level. It's by design, and the messaging is delivered at a time to deliver the utmost impact. And so, by the way, Bobby Kennedy made no bones about it. He said that he and Donald Trump have been the targets of lawfare. That he unfairly
Yeah.
was excluded from debates. That Kamala Harris was anointed without any type of
Yeah.
democratic process,
Mm-hmm.
that 15 million voters were ignored, that the press is in the bag for them. And then he spent a good amount of time, we won't talk about this now, but really ridiculing, as he should, the big food, big pharma combination and how it has made America very unhealthy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of his life's work, by the way. But I look at what Merrick Garland says, and I don't take him seriously. Meaning, I don't think that he comes from a place of lawfulness, and that justice is blind. I mean, here's a clown who steps up to the microphone and says, anyone who thinks that politics is involved in the work that we do here, blah 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 blah. I mean, come on, you can't watch what has unfolded with this Department of Justice with Joe Biden and Donald Trump, being treated two different ways, and not think this guy is an absolute circus clown. But he is a circus clown who is the Attorney General. I will tell you this. Uh, all the cards are stacked against Trump and Vance. This race is, in my mind, tied, and it's going to come down to a turnout model, meaning which side gets more to turn out. It's probably a little frightening for Republicans if you think about what happened in 2020
Yeah.
and how laws were changed in the 11th hour in battleground states so that the left had every opportunity to push in as many votes as they could under the wire. This could be 2020 all over again, is what I'm saying, and we'll see. I mean, I've heard rumblings, Joe, that the Biden Harris, in this case, would be Harris, regime will not go gracefully from the White House if they lose.
The reason I brought that up is I have a friend of mine who's a general contractor, and his brother went to Washington for the rally, did not go to the Capitol. And I'm just going to leave it there. His interpretation of how, what happened and the crowd he was in has always been different than a lot of the media reports. And that's just, it's troubled me because he's one of the finest people I know. I know the family, I know the brother. I don't know the brother. I know his, obviously my friend. And if he's anything like his brother, I mean, the integrity is high on these people. These are people that do work. And if they find they overbilled, they send the check. I mean, it's those kind of people,
Yep.
they live in like, Mount Vernon and, not in, they live in rural areas. So I think about him every time I see this kind of crap and know that he was just there using his right to, assemble, which
Yeah.
used to be okay in this country.
Well, it is if you're of a certain ilk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
at least on college campuses around the United States, some presidents and some governors took I would say sometimes it turned violent, but more it was the damage of property and it was trespass. It was those things. They took those things seriously. Um, but, and you don't want to get caught up in whataboutism and excuse the behavior of one group by pointing to the behavior of another. But, it's always struck me that we went through 2020 and what I uh, tongue in cheek call the summer of love, where cities burnt to the ground. There were almost 20 murders, over 200 assaults against police officers. And we were supposed to believe that was mostly peaceful. And even if it did get a little uh, not peaceful, that those were folks that were really just kind of expressing their frustration and rising up against the unfairness and the systemic racism in the system. And then you go, okay, well, somebody goes to January 6th and they feel like the system is a little bit rigged. They feel like it's unfair. They didn't burn anything down. Now, the people who did trespass and do damage, they should be punished. They should not be punished the way that they were punished. There were people that languished in the process, and the government absolutely took away their, I think is it the Sixth Amendment right to a speedy trial. Um, and so, yeah, I've got a huge problem, again, with the two-tiered justice system. That seems to rear its head every time somebody that is either right center or on the right gets in trouble.
You mentioned the turnout and strange things that happened. Just to kind of recall, a lot of those were associated with that $400 million in Zuckerberg boxes that were in Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan,
Yep.
etc. And make of that what you will. A friend of mine, Peter Schweitzer, who's written a couple of books, we were actually going to do a project on that, and then another project came out, and we weren't going to touch it. But the information he had, and I'm not going to redo the 2020 election, but the information he had, and these people are bulletproof. They're in Tallahassee, Florida, and their research team is as large as any production crew I've ever worked with. And it was always a topic that bothered me. It always bothered me that some of those things happened, and it bothered me that there were a lot of just normal people that had questions, and then they were immediately accused of being, conspiracy theorists. One thing that also I think is a little troubling is you have to immediately accept the results You're not allowed to voice an opinion of something that might have happened, and that also starts to feel like that's on the horizon, Jack. That we're going to be beaten into submission of not being able to talk about the election before the election, which starts to make me wonder what the hell is going on. And I'm not talking about cheating. I'm just talking about the feeling, the environment, these warnings. It's hard not to hear the rhetoric if you're in the
Hmm.
rhetoric business and be
Yep.
disturbed.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot there. I want to go back to January 6th for a minute and say, the shame in some of it is there's 40,000 hours. Now, obviously, that the event didn't comprise 40,000 hours. It's video from several different angles
Yes.
that the press should be analyzing and all over. And guess what? They're not. And January 6th is treated like it is a black swan event that was the worst in the history of America, and that it is the justification. I mean, you should, and maybe you do. You go out to social media and get out of echo chambers. Not that people get in echo chambers automatically, but because of the way that algorithms on Facebook and X work, it's easy to consume content from people who agree with you. So when you get away from that gravitational pull a little bit and you read some other stuff from people who think differently, they look at January 6th, man, like it is one of the darkest days in American history. Now, I certainly there were laws that were broken,
Yeah.
but the murder occurred to Ashley Babbitt, who was a Trump supporter. The other deaths were medical emergencies that were not caused by violence. I think one was like a stroke or some sort of
Yes.
medical
It was
mishap.
a security guard or a Capitol policeman who was, yeah, and it was also after January 6th, to be honest with you.
That's right. And by the way, this wasn't even the worst event at the Capitol. There were 4 or 5 more deadly, more destructive events. But again, it's weird that we live in this world that maybe you can't Google it anymore because maybe they've tightened things up and only delivered to you what they want you to see. But if you go over to DuckDuckGo or Brave browser and you start searching, it doesn't take long to go, okay, so there's been a lot worse that's happened at the Capitol. So again, back to what you said earlier about the press. The press is long now carried the water for this progressive cause, and the final thing I'll say is as we get into this short stretch now, I think we're at about 70 days. I think somewhere in that ballpark of the November 5th election. Just remember, it was in 2000, and then it was later on Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams when she lost as governor of Georgia. I mean, these are people who full-throated said that elections uh, were illegitimate, that the
Yeah.
winner was not the legitimate winner, and that we need to go back and contest these. Now, if you're on the right and you even hint of saying that, then you're a conspiracist, you're a right-wing wacko, and they need to lock you up. So, yeah, this feels, Joe, someone asked me the other day what I think. It just all feels really weird right now. I've got a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I pray that what is right and fair prevails this time around because I don't think that it did in 2020.
Yeah, Jack. Last thing I'll say, because we have about 3 minutes left here. I had a conversation with somebody I used to work with at NBC who is doing a little bit of work in a newsroom, and she was an anchor. She said when she goes in a little early, and the reason is she has to rewrite scripts because they are so slanted and beyond just basic journalism. And I said, are they just a bunch of leftists? Or she goes, I don't know if they're leftist or just a bunch of kids that are shouldn't be in journalism, shouldn't be producers, who just have just don't understand how to write content. So we're screwed either way. But there you go. That's somebody who is in the media basically saying it doesn't work. And people blame the media for a lot of things. It's hard not to look at the situation right now and say there's a lot of not fair-minded people out there trying to push
Yeah.
content and information down your throat. And that's why in Grab Your Gear, we were even created because we were supposed to have an open debate and discussion. And all I can say is, guys and women in the trades, you better vote.
Yeah.
You better go vote in your own best interest.
Yeah.
And it's critical.
I think the presidential race, Joe, I'll keep it simple and short. It's going to come down to turnout. It's going to come down. It's going to take people who maybe in the past have felt like, I don't even know if my vote counts. They're going to have to go vote.
Well, that's a
And
lot of our people. That's a lot of people in the trades under 30 who said, what does it matter? Well, it does matter. Especially matters for your jobs. We have a project coming out next month. Jack, you're helping us with it. Explains very thoroughly that when there's collusion and there's cronyism, you lose the merit
that's
shop.
right.
I think they need to understand free markets are being stifled right now. And here I am on a soapbox, but working on this project, and we've shared a lot of stuff. I know there's a lot of stuff you didn't know was going on. We shared it. We looked at it. The money is what astonishes me, what flows in and out of politics from certain groups. It's off the charts.
It is off the charts. And it goes back to what we say a lot. It's all by design. And so when you start looking at actors, elected politicians in this case, and they vote a certain way or they do a certain thing, you go, how in the world did they get there? Well, usually it's lobbyists. Usually it's monetary influence, or it's the preservation of power that they're fighting for. And make no mistake about it, there is a large and well-funded group that is lined up that opposes the Republican candidate in this presidential election, because the Republican candidate in this presidential election has very adamantly voiced his desire to cut government spending
Yep.
and shrink the size of it, and that is the death toll, the death bell for the career-long bureaucrats in D.C. And they're going to treat it for what it is. I mean, they're going to act as if he's on a revenge tour. He's not. He's saying we can't continue to support an entity that has piled up $34 trillion in debt and deficit spends at $2 trillion a year. That's $100,000 per person listening, Joe. We don't have the capacity to do that anymore. And so the people who are quite content building a big government and living off the tit of the big government are going to fight all they can against that.
Jack, we could go on for hours, but I know we both have to go do our day jobs. So thanks for joining us here on Grab Your Gear. We'll talk to you again on next Tuesday. In the meantime, follow Grab Your Gear, and we are on all the major social media platforms, so just go ahead and find us there. YouTube, Grab Your Gear. Check us out on TikTok, Facebook as well. For Jack Windsor of the Ohio Press Network, I am Joe. For Apprentice Isabella, who makes this thing run on time, we appreciate you joining us. We'll catch you the next time on Grab Your Gear.